Okay. We're working in the liminal space, the boundary space between the domain of the husband and the domain of the father. And the woman is leaving the domain of her father and entering the domain of her husband, or perhaps she's being divorced and moving from one husband to another. And the question is, can her vows be annulled in that liminal space, or whose permission is required? And we began by saying that if she's leaving her father's house to her husband's house, but she's betrothed but not married, so she's very much in the liminal space. She's betrothed, so she needs a get to free herself. On the other hand, she hasn't yet entered the husband's house, so she really is right on the boundary. And we said in this liminal space, she requires both the husband and the father to annul her vows. Now, in the sixth Mishnah, the Mishnah goes on to start thinking about what a woman who's not, so to speak, bound by betrothal, but bound by yibum. What if her husband has died? And so she's now bound automatically. She's bound by the death of her husband to her husband's, if she has no children, to her husband's surviving brothers. And if he has more than one surviving brother, by the way, she could be bound to more than one of them. So until one of them does yibum, she's bound to all of them. And that's where Mishnah 6 begins. Shomeret yavam, a woman that's waiting for yibum, i.e. she's bound to her brothers-in-law, but nothing has happened. She hasn't carried out chalitza to release them, but she hasn't carried out yibum either. So she's in this liminal state as well. Shomeret yavam, a woman waiting for yavam. Bein yavam echad bein lishnei yavam min Rabbi Eliezer omer yafer. Whether she's waiting for one yavam or two, regardless of how many brothers there are, Rabbi Eliezer says he can annul. And Rabbi Eliezer means the yavam can annul. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, look, there's some bond of marriage already contracted between this man and the widow. And he's consistent with the laws of marriage, because we've already learned, for example, that she can't accept kiddushin from she can't marry another person without performing chalitza, without releasing the bond of yibum. So Rabbi Eliezer says, look, this bond of yibum, this bond of levirate marriage means the husband can annul. And Rabbi Yoshua, so Rabbi Yoshua is the colleague in the opposition of Rabbi Eliezer. He's going to disagree. Rabbi Yoshua omer le'echad aval lo lishnayim. Rabbi Yoshua says it works with one yavam, and we can sense his reasoning, right? If there's one yavam, there's no doubt about the identity of the bond. Aval lo lishnayim, not for two. If there are two yavamim, if there are two possible bonds to brothers-in-law, well, we don't know which is going to be the husband. And Rabbi Akiva will actually have a third opinion. Rabbi Akiva omer lo le'echad ve'lo lishnayim. Rabbi Akiva, who's the student, really of Rabbi Yoshua, he's a half a generation after Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says neither for one nor for two. Rabbi Eliezer omer lo le'echad ve'lo lishnayim. As far as Rabbi Eliezer is concerned, this bond of yibum is not the bond of marriage. It doesn't allow the husband to annul the vows. So now let's hear their reasoning. Rabbi Eliezer omer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Lo echad velo lishnayim. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Sorry, Rabbi Akiva omer lo echad velo lishnayim. Rabbi Akiva says neither for one nor for two. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Let's hear the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer. Ma im isha shekanahu latzmo harehu mefer dareha isha shekanu lo shamayim eno din sheyafer dareha. Rabbi Eliezer says, look, if a man can annul the vows of a woman whom he himself acquired, and he doesn't mean he's bought the woman, but the point is he's carried out the legal act of betrothal to consecrate the marriage. And that's a human act, right? He's given her kiddushin and he said, and by the way, she's agreed. So there are two human acts that have created this marriage. And they result in the man being allowed to annul the vows of the woman. So he says, isn't it logical? Isn't it logical that he can annul the vows of a woman that heaven has bequeathed to him? If the halakha creates this bond, isn't it more powerful than a human bond? And by the way, this is the derech of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is the person who has this connection to heaven. He knows what the halacha is. He tunes into the halacha. He doesn't require majority vote. He doesn't require reason. The voice of the bat kol, the voice from heaven, comes out and says the halacha, it's always according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer knows the mind of heaven. So perhaps it's not surprising that he says that when a husband is assigned by the word of heaven, i.e., when the yavam is allocated to this widow because of the halacha, it's not surprising that the yavam, the levirate husband, can annul vows. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Let's keep going. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Lo, אם אמרת באישה שקנהו לעצמו, שאין לאחרים ברשות, תאמר באישה שקנו לו שמיים שיש לאחרים ברשות." Rabbi Akiva said to him, look, it doesn't work. If you speak of a woman whom he himself acquires, אם אמרת באישה שקנהו לעצמו, שאין לאחרים ברשות, if you're talking about a woman who he's acquired, he and she have done this verbal bond, nobody else has any rights in her. He's got if you like, they are, there's only one bond here between the man and the woman. But in the case of the Yibum, heaven, so to speak, has given the widow a connection to all of the brothers of the deceased, i.e., this bond is no longer unique. That's really what he's saying. Others too have rights in this woman. Rabbi Yoshua says to him, Amar lo Rabbi Yoshua, Akiva, Dvarecha bishnei yevamim. Akiva, your words apply to the situation of two yevamim. We agree with you there. Ma at meshiva yavam echad. But what are you going to answer if there's only one yavam? If there's only one yavam, again, it's a sole bond. It's not a dual bond. Amar lo, he said to him, Ein haviyav, ein ha-yavama gmura isha kashem ha'arusa gmura isha. Akiva says the Yavama is not as a completely acquired to the Yavam as a betrothed is to her husband. In other words, that there's something about the bond of the Yavam which is weaker than the bond of the husband. And maybe we can think that just as Rabbi Akiva seems to prefer the bond of heaven, and that's just as Rabbi Eliezer seems to prefer the bond of heaven. And that's very much Rabbi Eliezer's derech, right? He listens to heaven. Rabbi Akiva is the master of drush, of the human word. So maybe it's not surprising that Rabbi Akiva prefers the human bond, the words harei at mekudeshet, and the handing over the kiddushin, and the fact that a woman agrees. For him, that is a stronger bond than something created by the halacha on the death of the childless woman's childless woman's husband.